everybody, from the Beach Street Yacht Club, as usual. Studio B, Zhao Alexander has joined us. Sebastian Deschamps. Hope I said that right, Sebastian. Christopher Gillingham over in Livingston. James Dickens, Stingray up in Seattle. Robert Rollins, Rob Sternstein, and a bunch of others already on. Welcome to today's show. Bill Shore, one of the best sailors I've ever raced with or against, Newport, Rhode Island. Former head of our Olympic program, Lightning North American World Champion, and many other classes, America's Cup vet. Bill Shore, welcome. James Dickens, Bill Canfield, down presumably in the Virgin Islands. We're never sure where. But let's count down the last 10 seconds.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to show number 457, TFE Live, our twice weekly, what do we call this, a webcast, a videocast? What do we call it?
Videocast.
No one else calls it. A lot of people now just call them a podcast, a video podcast, but
Yeah.
you know, it's a webcast, it's a broadcast, it's a show, hopefully.
I know.
We're at Beach Street Yacht Club as usual here in San Francisco's beautiful Marina District, Studio B, which we almost always use these days. My co-host Julia Wedekind is here, a Commodore of the Beach Street Yacht Club and the moral authority. She keeps us on the straight and narrow, not just me, but Stingray and any of you other croutons who like to, well, everybody's well behaved. Welcome to show 457 for Tuesday, the 28th of September. The month is over. 28, 29, 30, Friday is the 31st, right?
Yeah.
We have one more show on the 31st, I guess, of this month, and then it is bloody well over. Hard to believe.
I know it, but the sun is telling us that already.
Yeah, it is all of a sudden gotten dark, hasn't it? Early.
It has.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Fun show today. No guests, but a lot of interesting tidbits here and there in the sport. We're going to try not to dwell so much on the bloody America's Cup because, well, the America's Cup has just gotten bloody boring, and we'll talk about why. Julia, you're a witness.
Yes. Even though it doesn't sound very exciting, there's bound to be a surprise or two. So, like, follow, and share.
You're not as tough and strong as you were a couple weeks ago.
Well, I think this is an easier day.
Okay. Well, you're the arbiter.
Yeah, but we'll see. We'll be watching to see who's not here.
Well, and who's not like following and sharing.
Yeah, exactly.
And comments are always welcome. This is the best thing about the show, or the FOSI, the Friends of Sailing Illustrated. We get hundreds of comments live and in replay. We leave the comments open in replay. And of course, we go back and look at the comments, not only to see if there's anything croutonic, but mostly to be sure that there's not something interesting that needs our response or your response or whomever's response, right? Good stuff. Thank you all. And join us on Patreon to support this, what is viewer-supported media. We don't take the odd ad, the odd supporter, like, you know, we get a sticker or two from James Pleasance and the World Match Racing Tour, and Julia, you've got your mug over there from Andrew
Mr. Pindar.
You hold it up a little higher, we can get his branding. And, you know, it's just a little, and if anybody wants to send anything like that to us, we'd appreciate it as well. But it's really Patreon that brings 5, 10, 15 or more bucks a month into our coffers to keep the lights on, keep the internet going. Patreon.com/join/Sailing Illustrated. We are deeply appreciative. Just a reminder, as we announced on Friday, the show will, as you are all going in and out of daylight time, they're now off, or they're on daylight time in New Zealand. So it's 9 a.m. in New Zealand now, rather than the normal 8 a.m. during their winter or summer. And Australia changes on to daylight time this weekend, and it gets very confusing, especially this month for the next 30 days or so, because we don't go off ourselves here in the States, off summertime, daylight time, until November 7th, I think it is, the first Sunday in October. So what we're going to do, just for those of you who didn't hear it last week, we are going to always go live at 2000 UTC year around. So that changes for us here in the States. When we go off daylight time, the show's an hour earlier. And when we're on daylight time, it's our 1300. But we will be going live at noon Pacific time once we go off daylight time. And I hope that's less confusing, Julia, for everybody around the world.
Once you get used to it.
And yeah, the Americans we don't use UTC or GMT so much, but the Europeans do, and they know what time zone they're in, and the Antipodeans do, and that's the South Americans do. That's where the bulk of our audience is. So we hope that all makes sense to all of you. 2000 UTC going forward for TFE Live is our airtime. And let's get into the starting line, our A block segment here. And it's very simple and rather personal. You know who this crouton is?
Yeah.
That is a Facebook member called Tom Jr., who got a lot of birthday wishes this week. It was much appreciated. Now, Tom Jr. is my surrogate Facebook account, of which any number of you are also a member or your friends or have been following. And that's because when we got knocked off the air by Facebook much earlier this year.
And for a long time.
Well, yeah, it was a month or so.
Yeah.
And we did the show on YouTube, and some of you were not amused about YouTube. So I put up the surrogate account. That's why this Tom Jr. account is there. I'll probably take it down, but just so you know, I'm not hiding behind a mask or a surrogate name or anything. But I do want to thank you all for the birthday wishes, because that account shows the birthday of this person, whose birthday was the 25th, so a few days ago, 3 days ago, daughter Meg Ehman and Tom Jr., the surrogate account at least, share the same birthday. So thank you all for the very nice birthday greetings.
For Meg.
For Meg. My birthday's not till a little later in the year. Welcome again to show number 457. Let's get on with the show. And John Emmett reporting in from a wet and windy Weymouth.
Hi, Tom, Julia, and all the FOSI. I'm talking to you from windy Weymouth today. I'll try and show you what it looks like. The tree probably doesn't really do it justice, but we've had really, really strong winds recently. So winter is coming, as they would say on Game of Thrones. The weekend, we were very lucky to get 6 races in, and it was actually relatively warm for this time of year, relatively light wind, and it was dominated by the under-21s, who are of course the future of our sport. And it was very nice to see, especially we had a northern event up in Sunderland, which I think it's really important to have the events around the country to make it easy for people to get to at weekends. Sailing in the UK is quite south coast central. I mean, I'm biased, places like Weymouth are very, very good to sail, but it is a huge amount of effort for those Scottish sailors to come down and compete. So I think it's good to have an event in the north of England. And Sunderland's a very special club to me. And I had a very good friend there called Martin Boatman, who was just a wonderful coach. And unfortunately, Martin passed away, but he's touched a lot of people's lives. And there's now a Martin Boatman bench. So when I did the interviews with the sailors at the end of the competition, it was really nice to sit there on Martin's bench and just that lasting memory of him. And the thing I remember is even when with the cancer he was too poorly to travel, he would always message me and ask how his sailors were getting on, because I was there at nearly all the competitions. And for him, coaching was such a important thing, and it had a really positive aspect to a lot of people's lives. So yeah, did the little chats because I think that's important at the end of the sailing. And both the sailors who won, Arthur Filey, who did the Ilka Sevens, and Tilda Nichols in the Ilka Six, sailed a great regatta, and they're now both off to the Europeans. So I'll try and cover a lot of these competitions, and I think this is the normal sailing for a lot of people, is the weekend. I mean, I've been lucky enough to make my career through working with professional sailors, and in fact I miss each and every one when they retire, but my life is normally that Monday to Friday sailing. But the vast majority of people who are sailing at weekends and making the sport accessible. In the UK, I think we've got something on every weekend throughout the winter, and competitions all the way through to November. Because the difference between training and racing, when you're training you can be quite efficient, or at least I do my best to be. So you go out and you do 2.5, even 3 hours with very little break, and you just work really hard and you stay warm. With racing, with the best will in the world, the wind doesn't always play ball. The race officers always do their best, and sometimes there's several starts, there's a bit of waiting around, and that waiting around does mean sailors can get cold and fatigued. So we tend to have more training in the winter and less competitions. So the events we have now are actually deciding who's going to go to the World Championships over the coming years, and we get to go to some very nice places. I mean, personally, I'm looking forward to heading off to Mexico and heading off to, I think, probably Thailand this next couple of big events over the next few years. And it's interesting that we tend to have these winter qualifiers, well, I say winter, autumn qualifiers that are sailed in strong winds and maybe quite cold compared to the venues we're going to train for. So we've got a Worlds coming up for the Ilka Sixes in Oman, which is very different from Weymouth in December. So it's the way it is mainly through the necessity, because we need to avoid the summer months in the UK, because all our top sailors are away doing international events, especially if the Olympic Games is in Europe, as it is this time. People will be really keen to spend time training in Marseille. So the events tend to be at the beginning and the end of season, and I think that's probably why we're always good at selecting good, strong wind sailors. But that's also something that we have in the UK a lot. When I look at the differences between, say, the UK and China, we get a lot more strong winds, they get a lot more light winds, and that obviously reflects the type of sailors that come out of these countries. And that's why it's so important for the elite sailors to do the travelling, to sail at lots of venues and get used to lots of different conditions. And the big one coming up this cycle is the Hague, which is incredibly tidal, so could be a high scoring regatta. We see how that goes. But wishing you a great show, and I'll try and get a bit of sailing footage from some of these events, but I'm always just begging people to take it for me. I'm not good enough to take a camera out of the water myself and sail. And actually this weekend it does look like it's going to be very windy, but maybe I'll have some footage next Tuesday. We'll see how it goes. So have a great show. Cheers.
He's just wonderful, isn't he? And
Yes.
sorry, John, for your loss. I didn't know the gentleman. Don't even think I know the name, but it was how fitting it was for you to sit there on his bench.
Mm-hmm.
And I
A
guess
great bench.
that happens at a lot of different clubs, I think, where people donate a chair in somebody's name or in their own name, their family's name. And I've seen a lot of yacht clubs. That's a nice thing. But John's sentiments about how the sport is a weekend sport largely, or the beer cans on a Wednesday or Thursday night
Right.
race. And that after all, that is the basis for our sport. It's the people in the bottom of the pyramid. It's not the few people that we celebrate at the top of the pyramid. And I love John's reports, Julia, as I know
Yes.
you do as well. Now, we criticized him a little bit last week for his music, and you noticed what that music was.
Yes.
And I don't know if it was perhaps a little bit more in honor of his friend who's passed
Probably.
away. And, we lost Luis Cahl this week. Luis Cahl, who is, I didn't know him well, but he was young, had apparently died of a heart attack, age 60. And again, it's the loss of these people, whether it's somebody like Harry Anderson, Julia, who passed away at 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a memorial race for him this weekend in Newport during the 12-meter North Americans, or other people like that, whom our loss of fairly recently of Commodore Dewey Hines here at St. Francis Yacht Club, who was a beloved past Commodore.
Yes.
And terrific yachtsman, and contributed quietly to a lot of different campaigns.
For a long, long time.
For a long time. So we're lucky. We're lucky also to have John Emmett. Thanks, John, for that report. Now, you wouldn't think that a musician would let that go. What was that music that John was playing nicely behind his latest video? There's your only clue.
It's a Moonlight Sonata.
It's Moonlight Sonata. Now, do you know what the name of that song was originally for extra credit?
No.
It was never, he did not call it Moonlight Sonata.
What did he call it?
Well, you don't think I'd have the answer here, do you? He called it, it was Opus something. Opus 2, number 27, I think, but his Piano Sonata number 14 was what the famed Ludwig van Beethoven, what he named it. And the name Moonlight Sonata, according to Wikipedia, comes from remarks made by the German music critic and poet Ludwig Rellstab in 1832, 5 years after Beethoven's death. Rellstab likened the effect of the first movement, it's a three-movement piece, as some of you will know, Moonlight Sonata, the first movement to that of moonlight shining upon Lake Lucerne. Within 10 years, the name Moonlight Sonata, Mondschein Sonata in German, was being used in German and English publications. Later in the 19th century, the sonata was universally known by that name. So there you go.
That's nice to know.
Isn't it? I think it is nice.
Yeah.
Now I'll be criticized. This is a sailing show. Why aren't you talking about sailing? Well, you know, it's Lake Lucerne, beautiful lake. It's the water. John Emmett just used it. It's one of the most famous pieces of classical music ever, right?
Right.
So why can't we use that in our silly sailboat show? We gotta class this up a bit, Julia. Moonlight Sonata. Thanks, John Emmett. And let's carry on here. This day is talking about this day in history. This is the day in 1066, I think it was. I'm not as up on my my European history as I probably should be. Well, isn't this the day that the Normans invaded?
1066.
In 1066, and then all the things happened after that. But the Norman language was installed in the UK.
Was it?
Yeah. And you know what the Norman language was? It was, you know, basically German.
German.
Yeah, it was the Northmen, but it was also the Scandinavians because the Vikings and the others who were down in that part of the world. I didn't go into that, but that also happened on this day in history. But and that was a seafaring invasion, and I started to go with that and then realized there was a big America's Cup dealie, a couple of them today. So this day in history, we'll celebrate a couple wins in the American Cup boat race on the 26th and 27th, 1983. Actually, the first one is from 1970. It was today on the 28th in 1970. Here's your first clue. Do you know who that is? That is gentleman Jim Hardy, the Australian, on Gretel 2.
Oh, yeah.
And he was and is, he's still alive and just terrific guy, one of the nicest people in the history of the sport, certainly of the many sailors I've known. Never sailed with him, I don't think, to think about that. But what a gentleman, terrific guy. He was steering Gretel 2 in 1970 against...
I don't think.
Come on.
I don't know.
Ficker.
Oh, that's Ficker.
Is quicker.
Oh, I should have recognized his hair.
The great starboat world champion
Yeah.
and the great from down in Newport Beach.
Right.
His daughter, Dion, is a dear friend.
Indeed.
And member of the Beach Street Yacht Club, Dion and Peter, her husband.
Yes. Who gave us a nice compliment last week. That was
They gave you a nice compliment because they always watch the show on replay because they're working during the day here on the West Coast. Dion and Bill, we call him Breeder for reasons that you'll shake your finger at me. Peter McDonald, who's the son-in-law of Bill Ficker, the late great Bill Ficker, who passed away a couple of years ago. And he was steering, of course, the yacht Intrepid. There in the foreground, that's Gretel 2 coming downhill. In the background, 1970, the Intrepid defeats Gretel 2 in the last race of the match by 1 minute 44 to successfully defend the cup, becoming the second yacht after Columbia. Now, we had this discussion the other day about Columbia, but it wasn't Columbia in the 1880s, 1890s, and then Columbia in 1958. It was Columbia that won in 99 and in 1901. 1899, 1901, that was the other double winner. And, of course, Intrepid was the double winner, and there was one other since then. Courageous.
Oh, yeah.
Courageous. So that, on this day in history, that's what happened. There is Bill Ficker, and that boat was an Olin Stevens, arguably his best boat ever. They took the rudder off the back of the keel, moved it to the back end of the boat, toward the back end of the boat, put the when it was still legal. We outlawed it. I say we, the 12-meter association. But you got the boom right down to the deck, and they put the grinders below. Look at how clean that deck is going uphill. You don't see any bodies at all. The trimmers are down in in the cockpits. And Ficker was quicker in 1977 on this day in history. Intrepid lost one race. What was it? The fourth race. They won 4-1 in the fifth race. So it was the fourth race when Gretel 2 had a big comeback, and gave the Aussies a bit of a, shall we say, a hopeful. They were a little more hopeful that they might have a shot at it. Remember too, they had the race where the boats went coming into the starting line, and Gretel 2 luffed Intrepid, and I don't remember if they actually touched or not, but Intrepid came up, maybe hit the committee boat, maybe not, but there was a protest, and Gretel 2, who carried on past the starting signal, and at the starting signal, the rules then said, still do, that you have to bear away to a close haul course, or a course no more direct than toward the top mark, when of course this was an upwind lake, so they go back down to a close haul course, and they did, and they persisted. And that protest was resolved in favor of Intrepid, who then won the race, although Gretel 2 had actually, I think, won the race around the track. But that's beside the point. In those days, you know who the jury was? The New York Yacht Club Race Committee.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the last time the New York Yacht Club Race Committee also heard protests, because there was such an international uproar about it.
Yeah.
That they appointed an IYRU jury the next time, chaired by the president of IYRU, Beppe Croce, coming out of the 19th. So that was an innovation out of the 1970 match because of that protest. That still, there are a lot of Aussies still today think that Gretel 2 and Jim Hardy and co. were screwed with a capital F.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think from I've seen some overhead videos, and the book was written by who was the race committee chairman now, I'll think of his name, Dev Barker, and others who, I think it's pretty convincing that that Intrepid was in the right. Sorry for my Aussie friends, was in the right, and the jury, the protest committee decision was also right. On this day in history, or this week in history, back in 1970, Ficker was quicker. Then, of course, there was the big deal in 1983. In the last couple of days, the 26th and the 27th, and it was on the 26th that was the final and deciding race of what, you can talk about the match here in 2013 when it went the full 17 and 18, 19 races actually.
Mm-hmm.
But this one was a big come from behind, because Dennis was up 3-1 in Liberty, and then this was the moment on the penultimate leg of race 7 when the Aussies crossed ahead, got to the inside of what would be the inside at the bottom mark, and Australia 2 was just simply faster downwind and not bad upwind in certain conditions. They held their lead all the way to the top and finished ahead of Liberty to win 4-3 in the 1983 America's Cup. As I'm sure all of you on here will know, that was Monday the 26th of September. Australia 2 defeated Liberty 4-3 in I was on the bow of the jury boat actually in 83, so I was as close physically to it as any other human being, I suppose. And it was just astonishing because Dennis had quite a lead. And in fact, Bertrand, there were a couple lead changes in that race, and Bertrand was ahead, and then he didn't cover Dennis, and Dennis got ahead, and then they came around the top mark. And Dennis had there were 2 legs left. It was then the old-fashioned Olympic course. It was triangle, windward, leeward, windward. And they went around the top mark the last time before the final up, down, and up.
Yeah.
And Dennis had quite a lead, minute-plus lead. But you could see and it was light. It was only kind of 5 to 7-ish from memory. And you could see almost immediately that Australia 2 was going quicker. A lot of people criticized Dennis and Tom Whidden for not covering. I think they did exactly the right thing. They knew they were going to get run down by Australia 2, and if they didn't jibe away try to find some fresh air over on what was the upwind right, they were not going to beat Australia 2 to the bottom mark, and they didn't, as it turns out. But a lot of people say, no, they should have covered. They should have held on to them, and We don't know, but it was a momentous day, probably the biggest day in the history of the Cup. I don't think you'd argue about that. After 132 years, New York holding the Cup, and Australia too on Australia's 7th attempt to win the Cup. I think it was a 6 or 7. I think it was a 7, and they finally win it. Alan Bond, Warren Jones, John Bertrand, fabulous team. A lot of those guys are still around and good friends, and we see them here, there, in WA and elsewhere. Marvelous team, well-sailed, beautiful boat. The late, great Ben Lexon, of course, Bob Miller, Bob Miller, and changed his name to Ben Lexon, designed it, and some say that the Dutch designed it. Certainly the Dutch did help design it. They did the towing tank testing at the Netherlands Ship Model Basin in the Netherlands. But that's all history. There he is in the foreground there. That's Ben Lexon. You can see Alan Bond there in the back in his green jumper and red. Eileen, I guess that's JB by then. Is that John Bertrand off the yacht and over on the tender? And or is that Red? That might be Red, Alan Bond's wife. Anyway, it was a marvelous moment. Those of you who were in Newport, we had it was just an epic evening and great parties, a lot of fun.
It was an epic moment here because the whole yacht club here just ran into a great roar of support of the
Aussies.
Of the Aussies.
Well, and it was, ABC carried that.
Yeah.
It was, I think it was ABC. It was the first televised yacht race of which we're aware, of America's Cup race. There may have been some other snippets, local coverage in Providence, Rhode Island, but they did send a camera up in a blimp, and I think Bob Bevere was up in the blimp that day, as were some photographers and go ahead.
Yeah, that was the end of a long East Coast, West Coast sponsorship of the America's Cup team, and the last 3 or 4 times had been won by West Coast sailors
sailing for New York Yacht Club.
Yes, and with West Coast money.
And, well, largely West Coast money, but it was a combo.
Yeah.
You had Texan money, you had East Coast money, you had some West Coast money. But remember that in those days you had, let's think about it. Dennis lost in 83, and then we go backwards. Dennis sailed and won in 80, and there was West Coast money for that and some Texas money as well as East Coast money. 77, Ted Turner won from Atlanta, not really, and was definitely outside of the New York Yacht Club establishment.
Yes.
70, before that, you had Ted Hood, who was definitely East Coast, and Bus Mossbacker, definitely East Coast, but Bill Ficker, West Coast guy in 1970. And 60s.
And Fritz Jewett.
Fritz Jewett had a lot of money in all those teams, though.
Yes.
And it was, Newport there was nothing like Newport. And these were fun times, especially that night when after the race, finally, Alan Bond, they were trying to decide whether to hoist it out and show the keel. And Alan was on the dock, and he said, should we show the keel? And the photographers are there, Dan Nerney and Guy Gurney and Daniel Forster. And I'd come over from my office on Goat Island to see all this. And Alan Bond and they all are going, yeah, raise the boat. So he gives the signal to raise the boat up out of the water, and we all got to see the keel for the first time. And you see this crouton back here on the wing keel. This guy in the tuxedo, he had, I don't know, it was kind of an old version of a stand-up, either was a kayak or a stand-up paddleboard. I'm not sure. It wasn't really a stand-up paddleboard. That's been invented since, I think. But the guy, I think, was kayaking, is that a word, kayaking? Around Newport Harbor that afternoon and evening, and managed to get in close and climb up on the keel himself. And I don't know who he was, but it was a marvelous occasion captured here by Australian television reporter who was in Newport. Have a look.
No one can accuse Australia 2 of doing it the easy way, but then the Americans did hold the America's Cup for 132 years, and it has taken Australia no fewer than 7 challenges to wrest it from the firm grasp of the New York Yacht Club. To win the Cup, Australia 2 had to come from 2 races down and from nearly 1 minute behind more than halfway through the final race. On the Newport waterfront, it was chaos and ecstasy as Australia 2 was hauled out. And this is what won it for Australia 2. the monster, as the Bond Syndicate call the bulbous winged keel that made the West Australian 12-metre so competitive upwind and uncatchable downwind. Australia 2 won the start of her final contest with Liberty, but the Australian skipper John Bertrand threw away a handy lead halfway up the first leg. He failed to cover the American defender, and Liberty's skipper Dennis Conner got better use of the breeze. The Americans were in front at the first mark by 29 seconds. By the end of the first of the two reaching legs, at the second mark, Australia 2 was 45 seconds behind. Heading down the second reaching leg, Liberty has extended her lead over Australia 2. It seems that Bertrand's errors early in the race may have cost Australia 2 the America's Cup. But it never pays to rule out a comeback by Australia 2. And on the fifth leg, the West Australian 12-metre got the opportunity to show what an extraordinary downwind marvel Mr. Ben Lexon has designed. Australia 2 picked up an amazing 1 minute and 18 seconds, and with that slid into the lead to be ahead by a slender 21 seconds with one leg to sail. Conner battled back but could not get close. The America's Cup was Australia 2's. The Australian syndicate boss, Mr. Alan Bond, said the trophy would remain the America's Cup and the first Royal Perth Yacht Club defence would be in 1987 or 88.
Quite seriously, John Bertram and his crew have done a fine job today, as you all saw. And I'm so pleased that we can say not goodbye to Newport and her many friends here, but an open invitation to the people of Newport and the people of America to come to Perth in Western Australia and try and win it back. We'll welcome you.
After 132 years in the United States, after the longest winning streak in sporting history, the America's Cup is off to Perth. Jim Middleton, ABC News, Newport.
That's ABC, as in Australian Broadcasting Corporation. A terrific report from that day, fateful day in Newport, the 26th of September 1983. But things got even more fun. That night is the press conference in the Old Armory, which is about to become, it is now, the Sailing Museum. And we're going to do, by the way, I talked to Andy Rose briefly this morning. We texted with him. And we're going to do some reports, road to the National Sailing Hall of Fame induction, which is later in October. Andy will be there. I can't because we've got a function here. Well, it's the middle of October, actually. And we're going to do a couple of reports about the Sailing Museum, which is a combination of the National Sailing Hall of Fame, the America's Cup Hall of Fame, and one other museum there in the Newport, Rhode Island area. So this is the Old Armory, now the Sailing Museum, or about to be. Well, it is now, I think, officially. And you see Peter Dalziel, I guess, on the left, who was the Commodore of Royal Perth Yacht Club, John Bertrand in the middle, Alan Bond, a young-looking Alan Bond on the right. There's Red behind JB in the middle. And off to the right, you can't see Warren Jones, who was the brains behind a lot of that operation. There he is now. That's Warren Jones, far right, introducing everybody connected with it after this raucous press conference. It was a marvelous occasion.
Yeah.
In Newport, Rhode Island, that evening, the 26th of September, and outside the Armory and on Lower Thames Street, I can't remember a more fun evening at any yacht race anywhere in the world. And the boxing kangaroo it prevailed, and it was the America's Cup was now Australia's Cup. And of course, down under, Julia, not only was it here, was it a wild party in a lot of other yacht clubs around the world, but of course, the late great PM, Bob Hawke, who was at Royal Perth Yacht Club out in WA, Western Australia, he was soaked in champagne at the party at RPYC that went on all night, and then he was interviewed, and there's some video of that I didn't bother grabbing. You've probably all seen it. And he basically said, he was asked, well, is tomorrow a national holiday? And he said, no, but if anybody is fired, your boss is, I can't remember what he said. But,
I know, but everybody took the day off.
Well, everybody was so bloody well hung over or still partying.
Yes.
Including in Newport. It was quite a night there in Newport. Then the next day was the trophy presentation. This was at Marble House, one of the grand mansions on Bellevue Avenue. In fact, probably the grandest. It's not the largest, but it's probably the most ornate and most famous Marble House. And this was Tuesday the 27th, 1983, so 38 years ago. Trophy ceremony at Marble House. Alan Bond winning the cup, of course, as the principal, as the team owner and primary backer. And Bob, the late great Bob Stone, Commodore of New York in those days. Remember, New York almost didn't run the Cup. They took a decision, a vote of the America's Cup Committee that was only, I think it was 8-7 or something like that. But they split vote on whether to proceed. And your friend Julia and my old mentor Jim Michael was leading the charge, past Commodore of St. Francis Yacht Club, saying we shouldn't run this. It's not fair. They've broken the rules. They wouldn't sign the affidavit saying that they had complied with all the rules. But the Commodore Bob Stone, Robert G. Stone Jr., who was a steadying influence, he said, no, we're going to run the event, and if they win it, they win it. And it was, after the acrimony of that summer, it was the most gracious, fun, lively event. This is the AP, Associated Press, report of the day, of the next day. After 132 years, the America's Cup officially changed hands Tuesday when the New York Yacht Club surrendered the silver trophy to the Australia to Syndicate. New York Yacht Club Robert Stone saying it was a day, quote, many of us hoped would never come, as he gave the cup to Peter Dalziel, head of the Royal Perth Yacht Club, whose boat Australia 2 won Monday's final race and ended the U.S. monopoly on the event. I'll skip through it, but if you go to, it was only a 30-minute, you skip down there 4 or 5 paragraphs, 30-minute ceremony at Marble House, and we were all there in our, our red pants, and I mean, it was not many people. That I was a New York member by then, and was, of course, executive director of USYRU, so they probably would have let me in anyway, but it was a marvelous occasion. And if you look down here I just skipped through a couple of these other paragraphs. It was marked by good humor on both sides. There was none of the bitterness that erupted this summer. The leaders of the Australian Syndicate effort had differing reactions to the historic cup. John Bertrand, I'm pleased, yada, yada. This is the greatest thing that you could do for our country, Australia, Bond told the midday crowd of about 200. It was a glorious day. It was one of these Indian summer, fall, bright, not a cloud in the sky or precious few, and warm and dry, and just a fabulous day. And the trophy, which had not really seen the light of day in many years, if ever, really out in the bright sunshine, sparkled. It had been all buffed up by one of the local jewelers. And so this is the greatest thing you could do for our country, Bond said. The great competition between our countries enabled us to say we're close friends, yada, yada. Bob Stone, then President Reagan, had a telegram saying, I'm delighted that it's home. Will be Australia, Reagan said, adding, quote, at least until the next race.
But it did do a lot for Australia.
Well, of course, it's still regarded. If you see these end of the year, what's the biggest sporting thing that ever happened in Australia? This is always right up there, if not at the top.
Yeah. But it brought the whole world attention to the Antipodes in a way that I think it hadn't been before.
And, of course, particularly WA, because one thing to get to Sydney, where a lot of people had been to Sydney or Melbourne, but to go all the way out to WA, which is like traveling from Miami to LA, it's a long way.
Yes.
You don't realize how far it is until you go. So there's this is a nice article. You can read it and replay, but the keel, and then instead, a New York Yacht Club, officials at the New York Yacht Club, which had held the cup since the first competition in 1851, had planned to make the presentation Tuesday in their Manhattan mansion. We told you that story before here on the show. Instead, a New York Yacht Club official quickly brought the trophy to Newport after the final race. Released from its inner sanctum at the New York Yacht Club residence, the cup sparkled under the bright cloudless sky. And then the governor of Rhode Island at the time, Joe Garrity, we hope they will, of course, maintain the cup the way we have said, but for a short period of time. And then there was the whole joke about the last couple of paragraphs about Bob Stone, Commodore Robert Stone. Commodore Stone gave them the bolt. Remember, the trophy was literally bolted because it's in several different sections. And there was a washer up in the throat of the cup, bolted down to the table in New York, and they unbolted that. They brought the bolt and actually presented it to Alan Bond. I'm not sure they took it home. Maybe it's in the museum now in WA. But the other thing they gave them was this, and I have a picture of it. Do you remember this whole, let me get off the screen here. There was a big joke. At some point, Ben Lexon, who's holding this hubcap, said, yeah, we're going to win that cup and we're going to just smash it into a hubcap. Use it as a hubcap down here, which he was obviously joking. But in the good spirit of the day, Commodore Stone, somebody had the bright idea at New York to give them, and I think it's an old Plymouth hubcap. Somebody on here will know. And they took a sledgehammer to it and hammered it up and gave it to Ben Lexit at the prize giving. And then, of course, there was one awkward moment when Bondi lifted the cup up, not realizing that it was not in one piece, and it literally came apart in his hands. This is not the worst picture of that moment. And you can see Scotty and John Longley chink there in the back, and some of the others. As this, it was a great moment in the modern history of the sport. I wish all of you had been there, Julia.
And didn't they pour champagne in it to drink?
That was not at Marble House. That was not at the prize game. That was at the night before.
Yeah.
In the mansion at 44th Street,
yeah.
the New York Yacht Club clubhouse down at 44th Street, because they poured some champagne in it and then lifted it up to drink it out of the cup one last time, supposedly. And of course, the cup came apart in that champagne because it's bottomless at that point. Champagne went all over the table and their feet. One last moment of
to remember.
Ignominy. On this day in history, Tuesday, the 27th of September, 38 years ago. How time flies when you are having fun, right?
No question.
We quickly got Sail Newport put together. We didn't know what was going to happen to Newport, those of us who were living there in the sailing community. And we said we need a Chamber of Commerce to keep these kind of maxi worlds major events. That's what the Sail Newport was originally formed to do. And of course, it's become now one of, if not the best community sailing center, certainly in this country, if not in the world. Together with Ida Lewis, Sail Newport this past weekend hosted the 12-meter North Americans. And this Worlds will be there next year. The Worlds alternate back and forth between Northern Europe and Newport. And this was, by all accounts, a terrific event. Smaller event than they had when they have the Worlds. But in Newport last week was the 12-meter North Americans, and they had the modern division, and they have the vintage or the classic, whatever they call the divisions. And the modern division was won by KZ3, one of the three plastic fantastics built by Team New Zealand for the 87 America's Cup in Perth, WA. I thought this was appropriate. And it was helmed by none other than our longtime friend Brad Reed, with whom I spoke this morning. Brad will be our guest on next Tuesday's show.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Brad, the younger brother and arguably more famous member of the Reed family. That's not true. Kenny Reed is a terrific sailor, president of North Sails, and Brad's a terrific sailor as well. If you would have said before the regatta, a quote from Brad, before the 12-meter North Americans, that we would all get 6 races in with the conditions forecast and it was breezy and bumpy, I would have said, no way, said Brad Reed, Middletown, Rhode Island, who steered Gunther Berman's New Zealand KZ3 to North American victory over the modern and Grand Prix boats. That's the one of the two divisions, which for purposes of this championship started together and scored as a single class. Quote, that the race committee delayed when they needed to delay and started early when they needed to start early was brilliant. So said Brad Reed, who will be on the show as our guest to talk about all this and more next Tuesday, a week from today. Thank you for joining us. If you're, we're about 43 minutes into today's show, number 457. I need to ask you all whether I should be covering this. We should be covering this extensively or not. Delayed by a day, the Mini Transat started in France, and it's sailing down to the Canaries and then across to Guadeloupe in the Caribbean. 100 boats, give or take. The Mini Transat, and they were delayed by weather in the Bay of Biscay, I guess, from Les Sables d'Olonne in France. They started yesterday, 1,200, is it 1,200 miles? 1350. And I hope they don't have any problems with the volcano down there in La Palma, in the Canaries. And then they have a week stopover there. Remember, these are six single-handed boats that are, 21 feet long. And no outside assistance, no sat weather even. And then after a week there, then they take the 2,700-mile trip down to Guadeloupe in the Caribbean. And that's going on as we speak. Here is a video report courtesy of World on Water with, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but to give you a little bit of flavor for the start and what's going on in the Mini Transat.
The first leg of the 23rd Mini Transat Eurochef set off this Monday the 27th of September at 15:30 hours local time, just a tad later than planned. The 90 sailors set sail with one reef in the mainsail, propelled along by a northwesterly breeze of between 16 and 20 knots. After rounding the windward mark, Briak Lebik in 914, Velo Trade, leading the way, everyone set a course for the open ocean. Right now 1,350 miles lay ahead of them, as they make for Santa Cruz de la Palma. We're getting to the heart of the matter now, and it's quite something. I don't really know what that is. The crowds, the noise, the encouragement. It's a rush of emotions. In concrete terms, it's the start of an epic and wonderful human adventure. We've all put a massive amount of time into preparing for the race, but the only thing we haven't been able to do is to deal with the emotion of the start. One thing for sure is that we're all raring to get going, commented Bossele Bignon, who is sailing Eden Red, shortly before casting off. This sentiment is shared by Leo DBS, Lay Alphas. There's excitement in the air, and a little bit of apprehension too, but on a personal level I feel confident all in all. The boat is ready, and the navigation has been studied. I know where I'm going. I have a very clear plan in my head. Right now, we're going to need to find our sea legs, and get into race mode as quickly as possible, explained the sailor from the Cevennes in south-central France. In fact, the first 72 hours of the race are set to be fairly crucial with, in chronological order, an easing of the breeze this evening, a key turn to position correctly tonight at the edge of a ridge of high pressure to avoid becoming becalmed, the passage of a front to negotiate on Tuesday night through into Wednesday, and then a wind shift to hunt down to thread their way along as smoothly as possible between Cape Finisterre and the eponymous traffic separation system. The negotiation of the Bay of Biscay promises to be quite complicated in terms of strategy. We're going to have to nail the
I think
timing
that's
of our
enough of that.
movements.
First of all, this is World on Water. Our
Clearly
good
going
friend
to a
Jeff
little
Waller
time
down
to
in
rest on
Australia,
something
who
around the
produces these
northwest
videos every
Seaboard
weekend.
but
And
it's
if you're
going to
yacht,
be
he sends these out to yacht clubs. He charges
The
something.
match is going to be
But then
incredible,
yacht clubs
and
play
above
this on
all
their
wide
TV
open.
system when they're not playing the
That's
local, I
particularly true
suppose,
after the
you know,
latitude of
cricket or
Vino, where
rugby
two
or
different scenarios
baseball or
come
whatever else you
together.
might play at your yacht club
The
on
first
the
might
screen.
enable us to link onto the
This
rundown
is an
of
automated. Listen to this voice. It's automated. This is
Is it?
second
yeah,
could be a little more laborious, with a great deal of uncertainty colouring play.
and that's
As
why
a
there's
result, we'll
some of
have
the
to be on the pace
pronunciations
from
are
the
a bit
get-go, and not
unusual.
dawdle on our way to Cape Finisterre, indicated Pierre Leroy.
But it's
Teamwork,
pretty good how
one of
good
the
these
fan favourites of
Yeah.
the
automated
2030
voices
Yeah.
are. It's going to put,
Prototype category.
like a lot of other, it's going to put some
Avoiding
people who
stuffing
are
up the
making real
introduction
money
is
doing
clearly the mantra
voiceover. Not
shared
that
by
I ever
all
do that,
90
but
of
there
the
are
solo
people who
sailors,
do
as Tom
as a
Ehman
livelihood,
Tollett,
working 3, 4,
MP
5 hours a
Chicago
day
confirmed.
for
Managing
companies,
to exit Biscay
voicing
quickly
commercials,
is definitely
voicing
a key
tell me
point
what.
in this first leg, because
So,
after Cape Finisterre,
Uh,
the front runners
this
are
is a
likely
little
to
too
see the
much on
mark
shore
the
and
rest
not
of the
enough on the
field.
water. I couldn't find one that
However,
showed
it won't be the easiest
something
of
more
all
interesting
those
of the
ways.
boats departing. There is one that's in
Essential to the
French
process.
and it was hard to download, but this is what these boats look like. They've become scow-like. They're a box rule, and the latest and greatest versions all have these kind of, not strange, but rounded bow-like, scow-like bows, and they are only 21 feet long. They're 6.5 meters in length and designed to a strict box rule, which limits the overall size of the boat. And they are not expensive, but they're technically complex. They're sailed single-handed. They have no outside assistance. They're not getting, they can't talk to their shore team. And they also can't use satellite weather. They're not getting satellite weather. So it's an interesting and difficult race, notwithstanding it's single-handed. So tell me if you think we should be, Julia, keep a look at the comments at the bottom, because my comments here are, I'm up higher on the screen. We'll go back to, there's so many comments. But tell us if you want us to follow this, we'll keep an eye on it. And it is a big event, and you have to say that anything that turns out 100 boats for any kind of an international yacht race, let alone a transatlantic, and it's mostly French sailors, but there's a smattering of Brits and Germans and a Russian or two and an American or two. So it's an international yacht race. It's, it's right down our alley. And I suppose we ought to cover it. What do you think? Do you think, Julia? What are people saying?
Um,
I mean, why not?
yeah, there's nobody that says yea or nay at the moment.
Okay. Well, it takes 20 seconds or so for people to hear the comment, hear us, because we're
mini transfer is very interesting.
Who said that? Who said that?
Cheer Dijon.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Dijon. Okay, good. Well, we'll take a look. We'll have a look at it unless somebody feels strongly. Yeah, Fritz Mueller is saying, please follow. I follow in French media boilers. James Frederick, covered. J. Frederick Bland says covered. So unless somebody's, text us or give us comments after the fact, and we'll keep an eye on it. It's a cool race. And look, I'm going to talk about the cost of the America's Cup today. I had a long talk this morning with Magnus on the telephone. And he and I have real concerns about the cost of not only the America's Cup, but the sport in general, and how we've gotten so technologically advanced, so big, so complex, so expensive. And when you have only 4 teams in the last America's Cup, and it looks like there may only be 2 or 3 this next time, tell me what? How many? There's something wrong. You need events like this that get dozens of sailors, countries, ideally. I mean, look, again, we go back to 83, which had, 6 challengers and 3 defenders, almost 10 teams in 83 in Newport. And then, of course, the high water mark in 87 in Frio in Perth, when we had 13 challengers and 4 defenders, 17 teams. And it's those teams that bring in more countries, because, you might get 2 teams from Italy or, we have 6 teams from the U.S. But even in the U.S., if you get 6 teams, you get the courageous team who was from representing Yale Corinthian Yacht Club, the Yale's university's sailing club. You got New York Yacht Club, you get St. Francis Yacht Club, Newport Harbor Yacht Club, San Diego Yacht Club, Seattle Yacht Club, Chicago Yacht Club. And suddenly you get more than just the coast, or maybe just more than one yacht club looking at the event. So great, multiple countries, multiple teams from countries. That's what we need for the America's Cup. We all know that. But we're not going to get that when the campaigns are $150 million and hugely technologically complex, because there just aren't the brains, there aren't the people, the experience, there aren't the sailors experienced to sail the boats. Look at this thing, though. A 21-foot boat. They have the box rule now. This is the 23rd edition. This race is every other year. The boats, they learn every time. More people get interested. More people hear about it. Sponsors say, hey, I want to get involved in that. And it gets repeated over and over again with regularity, and in a boat that's affordable. Now, we don't want to make the America's Cup, Julie. We don't want to make it a weekend, the Etchells Worlds. We don't want to make it into another weekend regatta or one design championship. It's got to be a design competition. But it doesn't have to cost $150 million and be so bloody difficult that nobody wants to host it.
Yeah.
Which is what's happened to the Olympics and what's happened now to the America's Cup. Who wants to host it?
Ben Ramacher said there's an open and production division of the mini transfer.
Yes.
I think that should have been in the offshore Olympic race. Absolutely relevant to the sport.
I think that, Ben, that's a very smart comment, I think. And there is he says there's a production there. They call it production division, but it's a one design, very tightly restricted. There's a little bit of, in this in this mini, the 6.5 meter boats. And then there's a more open division as well. So it's cool. It's cool stuff. The French have thought it through carefully, and that's why they have a lot of boats and a lot of entries. What else?
Gordon Smith says, I couldn't see that working for race coverage. And
what's that mean?
How one could cover that race well, I think. And Pedro says, yes, cover this French race. Australia has a submarine in the division. Harry Smith says, definitely cover real sailing. And James Frederick Bland said, AC went for years with just 2 challengers. What's the problem?
Because people want more than that. They want to see a bigger event. They want to see something other than just a one-on-one. And I think and we got a lot of sailors who want to participate in it. Fritz Mueller, you see this comment, Julia, about back to Transat, the Mini. Transat. There's even a CNC kit for building in plywood to the mini Transat rule. So you can go buy a plywood kit and nice.
Yep.
Good stuff. Okay, so we'll cover it. It sounds like you're all interested. They're in the Bay of Biscay now, headed to their first stoppage, their stopping off point in the Canaries, La Palma.
And the Bay of Biscay is no easy piece.
No.
Ever.
Exactly. And that's why they delayed a day, because they let a storm go through. And of course, this time of year, it's late in the year, and the storm's coming across the North Atlantic. And then from, as we said, the La Palma, and then they have a week there, and then they go across to Guadeloupe. So it's France to France. Okay, we're in just about almost an hour in here. Let's do a Bravo Zulu. And this is, speaking of France, this is an interesting development. A lot of interesting developments in Sail GP, but notably this, just out before we went to air. You know who this gentleman is?
No.
He is a good all-around sailor, one of these great young French guys who's experience in offshore and in mully hulls and tell me what else. And today, the France Sail GP team announced that they'll have a new driver for the Spain Sail GP in Cadiz in Andalusia, which is the first weekend in October, following the announcement that Quentin Delapierre will be taking the helm of the team's F50. Fresh off the back of the Tokyo Olympic Games where he placed 8th. Well, I checked. He did place 8th, and it was in the NACRA. Ben Remacher will know about this guy, speaking of Ben, because he is, as I said, a great all-around sailor. He's been sailing in the GC 32s, is that right? 29-year-old from Brittany will take over from Billy Besson for the remainder of the Sail GP Season 2, and that's after Billy had a rather disappointing go at their home event in Saint-Tropez a couple weeks ago. So that's news, and I think quite seriously big news. Bravo Zulu. And then while we're at it, we should mention that Sail GP is also, they're on the venue, they're on a mission, and just when you thought the America's Cup might be going to Cork, of course, we told you it wasn't. We told you it's not going to Spain. Well, it's not. In the meantime, Sail GP, which has been negotiating, and I was not at liberty to talk about it. And when somebody says, please, here's what's going on, don't talk about it, we don't. If somebody lies to us or, obfuscates or something, then we'll dig harder and find it and break the news. But we were told that there was a negotiation since months going on with Sail GP in Ireland, because Ireland's a logical country to have a team as well, because there's plenty of dough, high-tech companies. But you can get a Sail GP team and event for 1/10 of the cost of the America's Cup, maybe less than that. And Sail GP announced this week, or Ireland, I guess, Irish sources announced that yes, they're negotiating with Sail GP for an event next year.
Great.
In I guess in not in Cork, but in down in Dublin, in one of the coastal areas, just off of Dublin. So that is cool, and that's, I think, great news for Ireland, and it's great news for Sail GP. By the way, one also hears today from one of our FOSI, I don't know if he wants me to name him or not, JV, I'll say that much, and he tells me that they are Sail GP, he hears, and I haven't confirmed this myself, so this is just a rumor, this is not a one hears. He says that they're negotiating with Singapore, that is Sail GP. He named a couple other countries, but most importantly, he said they're negotiating, Julia, with, ta-da,
Yes.
Las Vegas.
No kidding.
Not a lot of wind in Las Vegas, or sometimes there's a lot of wind. But, there's betting and there's entertainment, the entertainment capital, arguably, of this country.
Yeah.
And sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and what goes on in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas, right?
That's what they say.
So Sail GP is on the move, continuing with this event coming up in Spain early next month, and Bravo Zulu to Quentin Delapierre. Now, Julia, what do we have for comments now? Jonathan Frank, watch Sail GP take the public interest the Cup desperately needs.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Lots of countries. What did I just say 5 minutes ago?
Yep.
Lots of countries, lots of sponsors, lots of eyeballs, more sailors. Mary Jude Samansky, Alan Long, shallow draft on Lake Mead. Yeah, but so what? They can sail those boats on Lake Mead, I think. I do love the Hangover movies. What does that mean? The Hangover movies about Las Vegas.
Oh.
Okay. See those movies? I'm too old for those, John. Huh?
Yeah.
Richard Dreverman's watching. Good luck for Ireland, Ed Worley is saying. Oh, Ed must be Irish. Gordon Smith, an event, but will ROL have a team as well? What's ROL? Huh. Are we going to discuss the proposed net? Yes, we are, David James. Mm-hmm. We'll get to that in a sec. For those interested, thank you, John Emmett. A video. Julie Ahrens is on. Julie, you said, I thought you were going to come on the watch party. We had a Zoom watch party on Friday. It was open to anybody that wanted to come on, but we'll get you on here if you've got some strong things to say. Maybe we'll record a segment with you ahead of a show we do and put you on via tape. Quentin D looks great, but Billy B has had some very good sail GP races. Yes, he has, but apparently there's some internal strife, Stingray, and Billy Besson has been excused, at least for the moment, from further participation. James Bland saying, okay, dinghies come in flat pack plywood kit sets too. He's always, as he should, promoting the sale, the OK Dinghy, because he's the Secretary General, I guess, of the class here, at least in North America or America. French Knacker, John Emmett is saying, yes. Or like the 12s in the post-war period that were wood. Yep. Love the mini Transat. Sandy Wertanen is saying, okay, so we'll do that, Sandy. Gordon Smith, an adaptation of the mirrored dinghy design. I could fix mine. Mm-hmm. Ed Worley, the Cup has arrived again when the boats are too expensive, like at the turn of the century with the super yachts like Reliance and the Jays were adopted to save money. Yes, good point. Good point. And on and on. And lots of comments that I missed early in the show. More challengers, Emmett is saying, is far more fun. Also, the more countries involved, the greater the worldwide audience, and the more our wonderful, beloved sport of sailing gets promoted. I couldn't agree more, John. We need countries, we need teams, we need an event that is not just one-on-one, that is not just exclusive to 2 or 3 teams from 2 or 3 countries, 4 countries, counting the Defender. AC has to get off the foiling drugs. Bill Wingrove is saying, I'm not sure that'll happen, but there's ways of doing that too. Supplied by the U.S. or U.K. Didn't Jonathan McKee almost win it one year? Is that true? The mini Transat? Did Jonathan McKee sail in it? Stingray can track that down for us. Anybody else? You should definitely, I think you read this one, Julia. Harry Smith saying you should definitely cover it. It is real sailing. Yep. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Okay, let's carry on here. If there's some comment that we've missed early in the show because we were babbling on here, James Dickens, yes, follow, please. But repeat your comment, and Julia and/or I will pick it up as we move along here into the C block, which is the America's Cup, and it's AC 37 Cup date. I do not want to beat this venue horse to death like we've been doing on and on because there's so much going on. I did talk to Hamish Ross late last night. He still declines to come on the show with good reason. I can understand because he's in the midst of this, and he was so severely criticized in that press release by Daltz for having approached New York Yacht Club. That is Hamish Ross saying, would you go to the New York courts and try to knock the Royal Yacht Squadron out of the Challenger of Record box? And that was not such a good idea. But Hamish is also a bright, well-connected guy who wants to try to get the Cup back to Auckland, as I think do a lot of people. I think if Daltz could try to figure out how to fund it and not fall completely apart with no money for their defense, he would love to have it in Auckland too. Who wouldn't? As well as the team. But the AP flag is still displayed at the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, and Daltz has apparently gotten on his proverbial horse. He's gotten in the Emirates airline, as we told you last Friday, airliner, and he's on the road again. Mm-hmm. Tra-la-la. Isn't that how that song? Yeah. Isn't that an old country and western song where it's on the road again? I don't know.
That's Willie Nelson.
It is Willie Nelson, isn't it?
I think so.
Well done. Somebody will know that. So Daltz is on the road. One hears he's been visiting these venues, potential venues in Ireland, but it's not going to happen there. I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen in Spain. one hears that there are other places in the Middle East heating up. And I can tell you that with some reliability now. We've been telling you about Abu Dhabi, but apparently that is not one of them. We've forgotten, I think, some of us have, about Bahrain, which is a very western-facing country. Remember, Bahrain was just really a tiny island just to the, northwest of Dubai. Tell me if I've got that wrong. And you had a Formula One event there. Then there was a bit of a governmental upset some time ago. But remember, the Americans, the Fifth Fleet is our big naval fleet is there in the Med in Bahrain. And
don't you still have the same problems?
Well, Med in the Persia,
yeah,
in the Arabian Sea, in that area. But Bahrain, is pretty Western facing. Women vote. Women go to school. It's quite a bit more liberal country than even the UAE, let alone Saudi Arabia. I don't think it's going to happen, folks, in Jeddah. I've been telling you that. There's too much pushback from too many people. And remember, who calls the tune? He who pays the piper calls the tune, right?
Right. And
who's the piper? The sponsors.
Yeah.
And they're not amused.
Yeah.
And they need New York Yacht Club. And they need Mr. Ineos, Sir Richard Ratcliffe, to be happy. Where are the New York Yacht Club boats, Julia? They're ensconced in Auckland at their team base.
Yes.
Where are the Ineos boats? They're ensconced in Auckland in their team base. The only boats that left Auckland were Patrizio Bertelli's boats, and they're back in Cagliari.
Mm-hmm.
So what do Ineos and New York Yacht Club know or hope that the rest of us don't? And what does Mr. Bertelli know? Now, the other interesting, I keep hearing, I can't run this down, but I'm trying. Magnus Wheatley has hinted, maybe even not even hinted, said that he thinks in one of his columns, one of his posts, that Tuke and Burling, Blair Tuke and Pete Burling, have not re-signed with ETNZ. And I'm trying to run that down if any of you has better information, but it could be that Mr. Dalton has a new afterguard lined up. I'm sure Glenn Ashby will stay with him, I assume, but maybe there's some new blood coming to ETNZ because Tuke and Burling are trying to exercise what you might call their Coots and Butterfield options. This is going to be very interesting to see, which is why we're going to talk about the nationality rule here in a minute, because that, of course, will play into all this.
Yeah.
Julie, you got a comment?
Well, a couple. The Jeff Waller is doing English reports of the mini transit.
Yes, and that's the one we played.
Yeah.
That's from World on Water. Thank you, Jeff. And I think that's auto, though I think the lady's voice was an
translate
voice, well, not a translation, voiceover of a script that he had provided, I assume, I think. And I was going to offer to Jeff, hey, if you want us to voice some of that, we'll do that in return for just being good friends. That's not hard to do, and happy to do it if you'd rather have somebody, and if it's a time zone thing or whatever. But it's also free, or largely free, rather than paying somebody when you get one of these so-called voice artists.
Yes.
Any other comments before we go back to the cup?
Stingray says sail GP races could be held in the pool outside the Hotel Venezia
in
Vegas.
In Vegas. Well, it's coming down to this, gentlemen. This guy may hold all the cards, and of course that's Sir James Ratcliffe. They have rebranded, as we told you, without any. In fact, Magnus wrote a story about this today. They rebranded without much fluff or buff. In fact, you just went on their website, and there it was, Ineos Britannia. And I said, what is this? Checked around, and sure enough, they're no longer Ineos Team UK. And I think that's with good reason. After their rather dismal performance in Auckland, I think they want to have a new name. And they're going to get behind Ineos Britannia. Rita is on the website. Well, we showed you that. I'll show you again, in fact, is in red, because that's been the name of Sir Ben Ainsley's boats, Rita, which fits nicely within Britannia. But this guy, I think he's got plenty of dough. He's, I think, quietly gathering up real strength in both the operations, but also in the personnel. And as we told you last Friday, they are going to have an announcement Next, what is it? It's the 6th. Is that, what day is the 6th? Is that Tuesday or Wednesday next week? But they're going to do an announcement at their Formula One. Remember, he owns a third of the Mercedes F1 team. That is he, Mr. Ineos, Sir Jim Ratcliffe. And Ineos Britannia, look at the Royal Yacht Squadron Limited now. They're very carefully putting Limited on there. I still don't think that's an issue. But they own a third of that team, and it's on the 4th, not the 6th. I beg your pardon. An announcement coming on the 4th. So if the 1st is Friday, is the 1st Friday? This Friday, is that what is today? Today is the 28th, 29th, 30th. Yeah, the 1st is Friday. And Saturday, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So it's Monday the 4th. And it's at Brackley, which is their Formula One complex. It's a terrific place. It's home of the Mercedes AMG Petronas Formula One team. Brackley is situated 70 miles northwest of London, has been the home of the Mercedes AMG Formula One team ever since the three-pointed star returned to F1 with its own works team in 2010. Mercedes has been in and out of F1 since the 50s, and after that horrific accident at Magny-Cours in Belgium, when the cars literally flew off the track and into the trees. Ooh. Is that it? When they pulled out? Somebody who's an F1 buff will remember. But then Mercedes got back in it as an engine supplier, notably to McLaren for a long time when they had some success. And when I was actually involved with what was then called West McLaren Mercedes, because West was a German company sponsor, was the title sponsor with their tobacco, their cigarette brand West, which is a Marlboro knockoff wannabe. But F1 has enjoyed the return of Mercedes, and the team operates a state-of-the-art technology center in Brackley that covers an area of 60,000 square meters. The site provides cutting-edge facilities for the design, development, manufacturing, assembly, and operation of championship-winning F1 cars, and they have done very well indeed over the last few years, both in the Constructors' Championship, which is a combination of the score of the two cars that are in the race from a given team, and also the World Championship, which is whichever driver has accumulated the most points from all the races. And of course, the British driver Lewis Hamilton, who's been driving for this team, has won any number of championships. Sorry, we need one of you who's a F1 buff to give us that information in the comments below, Julia.
Mm-hmm. Julie Aarons has a point which says, I agree with Ted. Strong nationality rules. I think it should be a contest among nations. That was the original idea from Prince Albert.
Well, it was in the deed. It was not Prince Albert so much as it was the deed of gift that were given by the owners of the Yacht America to New York Yacht Club when they donated the trophy to them in 1857. Mm-hmm. Let's go back to Brackley, though. This is going to be a powerful operation. They have wind tunnels. They have CFD experts. They have people who know how to run teams and win. And next Monday, I guess it is the 4th, whatever day the 4th is, I think that's Monday, they will be airing virtually this press conference, which is an introduction to their AC-37 team. Now, you yourselves can go do this inside TAC. You can sign on to watch this, home of the exclusive Ineos Britannia live shows, and you can sign up at their website, ineosbritannia.com/EN for English, probably in other languages, /inside-TAC, which talk about Formula One is a play on inside track, which is a Formula One term, or sort of a Formula One term. So you can sign up and watch it yourselves. We'll be watching it and then covering it in detail on our Tuesday show, no doubt. I think Jim Ratcliffe has got a very good chance. I do sincerely think it's the Brits' best chance of winning the Cup ever. And
he's in the business of winning.
Exactly. And you got piles of dough. He's got experts in his company that have been running and working with people who are running not just the F1 team, but the Grenadiers, which is the cycling team that won the Tour de France. First time the Brits have won the Tour de France in memory. And soccer teams, and I'm not sure what all else. Let's go to the comments, Julia. I'm sure there's a ton of comments.
Well,
and then we're going to talk about nationality and whether the nationality rule is correct or crutonic. Wow, look at all the bloody comments.
I know.
Who's going to argue with his mother? Anybody? Who's arguing with whose mother? Interesting aside, TFE left Formula One because he had to advertise the wonders of cigarettes. That's strictly speaking not quite true, but I did get I knew going there that I was going to be working for a tobacco company, and I'd be one of the few non-smokers in it, but I'm a libertarian, and the libertarians, as libertarians, we all say the freedom to
do what you want.
Choose. Freedom to choose.
Yeah.
And if somebody chose to smoke, I supported that. I didn't want to be around in their secondary smoke, and I didn't want to do it. And I didn't smoke, never have. I had a cigar, and maybe, Mom, don't listen. Cover your ears. And we all smoked a bit of pot freshman year in college till I said, I don't like this stuff. I don't like the feeling. Did you smoke pot?
No.
Never ever. We'll have to get you high. We got my wife's mother. We got my mother. We tried. They were we tried to get them high.
I had twice somebody gave me a cigarette to smoke, and because I was smoking cigarettes.
Cigarette or pot?
Pot,
yeah.
But because I smoked cigarettes, no problem, and I inhaled deeply, and I did all that. Nothing ever happened to me.
We'll get Stingray down here and teach you how to do it. I think he likes his pot, so our other friends do, but I don't. And I didn't like working for a tobacco company. And remember too, that at the time, and this is an interesting time. At the time, the tobacco companies and tobacco advertising was getting outlawed in the EU and beyond. We'd already outlawed it here in the U.S., but it continued in the EU. Some countries like Germany, it continued, and then you started doing what was called alibi advertising, and we figured it was an interesting challenge, how to advertise and make it look like it was West McLaren Mercedes or it was Marlboro Ferrari without it actually saying it. But then when you realized, and this was never talked about, but I started to figure it out, that what we were doing with Formula One and in fact, I hired Lewis Hamilton. Ron Dennis came to me, and when I was working for West and his title, that was McLaren Mercedes title sponsor, he said, hey, we got this up and coming young driver. I want you to sponsor him in Formula 3 or 3000, I can't remember what. Or really, he's a kart driver. He was 12 years old or something. Really, you want to do it? Yeah. And I went back, talked to my bosses in Hamburg, and they said, yeah, that fits in right in with our strategy. Well, what strategy is that? To get younger people to smoke. To get young people to smoke. And I said, at that point, I said, don't think I want to do this anymore. So that's a short story long. Okay, we're going to take our 7th inning stretch, Julia, and let everybody else stretch. Take a drink. I'm going to stand up, Julia.
All right.
You don't have to. You've been doing it, though.
Yeah.
I get off mic here. You can't hear me on my shotgun microphone that's overhead. Feels great. You did well.
Yes.
I think since we've been doing this, we've both been doing better. If we had a cocktail, we'd probably even be better.
You're probably, yeah.
Oh, dear.
Oh, dear.
Kansas City Symphony and Chorus, the traditional 7th inning stretch here in this country at least, during our baseball games. Michael Stern conducting, and as I think I did say on Friday, one of our FOSI has written a Take Me Out to the yacht race.
Oh, we get to see
and we're
it.
still working on that. He's reworking it, and we're going to get that, and we're going to somehow record it. Maybe I'll get Meg to play it, or I'll play it, or one of you wants to play it. Maybe we'll get Clark Chapin and his wife to do something. Maybe my mother will take the words and play her guitar and do it.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Kansas City Symphony Orchestra for our 7th hour stretch. Show number 457. We're an hour and 20 minutes in, and we are now to correct or crutonic. It was great having Jody on the show last week, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. When he gave us a tour around. Now, this is a 2014 photo, an image with graphic that Craig Lewick did for Scuttlebutt when this nationality rule for the 2017 Cup was being mooted, it was being discussed. And this is on the back of the Oracle boat 2013. And, you know, this is always talked about, the America's Cup and a nationality rule. Remember, the America's Cup really only had a nationality rule from 1980 until 2003. Prior to 1980, there was no nationality rule. In fact, you had, in that first race around the Isle of Wight, you had a British pilot who helped America get around and avoid the shoals, and maybe did more than just piloting. Maybe he really was more by way of a strategist or tactician even. But you had a British guy on the yacht America. Okay, that was AC0. And then you had the famous Scotsman, Charlie Barr, who won 3 cups in a row. 3. I got to be careful what fingers I use here. 3, or I'll get Julia's finger at me. You won't do that to me, would you? I did this.
Okay.
And Charlie Barr, who was Scott, and he became a naturalized American citizen, I think, after the second win, but nonetheless. And then you had the Scandinavians. You had the so-called Swedish steam, and you had the fishermen coming down from Canada and others that crewed on defenders all through the early part of the last century. So it was only 1980 when New York finally put in a rule, and you know why that was, Julia, because our mutual friend about whom we spoke earlier in the show, Andy Rose, down in Newport Beach, with whom I'm going to go to the football game this weekend down at Stanford. And Andy Rose was hired by the Aussies to be tactician for them in 1977. Not that didn't help them win. They still got beaten by Ted Turner and Gary Jobson, but the New York Yacht Club said, wow, we better not allow this. And they started putting in interpretive resolutions saying that to give meaning to the friendly competition between foreign countries, sailors and the designers, and some of the equipment has to be by way of, has to be national. Well, that lasted, and it was really easy to circumvent that rule. That lasted from 80 until 2003 when S&G Alinghi won the Cup. We Golden Gate were the challenger of record, and the aforementioned Hamish Ross and I had a protocol that just dropped the nationality rule completely because it was basically impossible to enforce and pretty meaningless. It needed to be a much stronger rule than New York's rule, and no one had the stomach to make a stronger rule. Again, Craig Lewick ran this in Scuttlebutt in 2014, pointing out the fact then that who's on the Otusa boat, Golden Gate Yacht Club's boat, 3 Aussies and a Brit in the back end in the afterguard. Otusa's 2013 afterguard. So I ask you, is it correct or crutonic? Because a lot of you and the spectators have said, yes, we need a stronger nationality rule, something like Daltz and Ineos, Daltz and Sir Jim are talking about, a virtually 100% rule that you got to have a passport of the country that you're representing, or you have to have been in that country. What was it? In the country, sailing for that country of the club you're representing in the years leading up to the 2021, the Cup just behind us. Not prospectively. In other words, you can't now move to tell me where, to Italy, now to sail for the Italians. Jimmy Spithill can sail for the Italians because he sailed for them last time. Can Jimmy Spithill sail for the Americans because apparently he has an American green card or passport, lives in San Diego, married to an American wife? I don't know. Regardless, that's not the question. Is it good for the Cup, good for the sport to have a very strong nationality rule, stronger than we've ever had, which is what's apparently on the cards? We haven't seen the protocol yet. Supposedly going to see it in November. Or, on the flip side, and listen to the whole argument. If you haven't read Magnus Wheatley's post this morning, he makes a very strong argument that there should be no nationality rule, that the sailors are really the sailors who want to sail in the America's Cup are being knocked out by this nationality rule, which strongly favors New Zealand and the UK, the defender and the challenger of record, Magnus would argue. And also Magnus would argue that it's a violation of EU law, for starters, because you can't, you have a right to employment and a right to seek employment. Now, the Brits are no longer in the EU, but still there is EU anti-competitive law. And I've talked at length with Hamish Ross about this, we've always been a bit concerned about nationality rules being challenged in court as being anti-competitive, antitrust law, anti-competitive law. And I mean, take some sailor who is a really good sailor from France, France doesn't, sorry, Julie Aarons, France, and France doesn't have an America's Cup team, that sailor can't go sail for somebody else.
Jody Shields saying on that, nationality rule is only relevant if you're trying to make heroes out of the athlete. Otherwise, you just follow the team.
Yes, and that's a really good point. But I ask you again, in this correct or cretonic stage of this show, is it correct or cretonic to have a strong nationality rule, and why? You got to put some comments on. A lot of people on here, 80 people watching live. Thanks, welcome to all of you. We're an hour and almost half in.
Yeah.
But that is the segment, and probably teased it at the top of the show.
It's a lot easier to cheer for your own country or a
Well, you
country.
feel strongly. I know you've always felt strongly, right?
Yeah.
But then people make look at. I was talking with Magnus this morning. So look at a Formula One team. You cheer for an F1 team based on if you like the driver, if you like what country the driver is from, maybe. But a whole lot of people in Italy cheered forever for the Tifosi, the Italian supporters of Ferrari, didn't care that Michael Schumacher, a German guy, was driving and winning for Ferrari.
Right.
Nobody really, the Brits still cheered for Wes McLaren Mercedes, notwithstanding that a Finnish driver, Mika Häkkinen, was driving for us. So, and winning the world championship a couple of times. We cheered, Julia, for the San Francisco Giants or the Golden State Warriors, the basketball team, or the San Francisco 49ers, irrespective of where the players come from.
Yes.
And they might come from Central America. Most of them are probably American, though, to be fair, but they don't come from the Bay Area.
No.
Some of them do.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them do.
And we cheer for them especially.
Well, and we tend to cheer for college people.
Yes.
You know, like Tom Brady, who's arguably the GOAT, the greatest of all time college football quarterback, or he is a pro quarterback now at age 40, whatever he is, lost this past weekend for Tampa Bay, but nonetheless, he played at a particularly good university.
Yes.
The University of Michigan. And because he played there, I follow him and cheer for him, and not because he's Tom Brady, who grew up here in the Bay Area.
Right, yes, he did.
Right. So is it correct or cretonic? We ask you. Bill Shore, what do you think? Bill watches, he lurks, he doesn't often comment. Clark Chapin, a nationality rule is a lot like the death penalty. It's easy to be in favor in principle, but the process of writing a truly equitable rule is either unworkable or impossible. Julie Aarons, I think that those nations competing should have a program that trains sailors who want to sail at a high level. Well, I think the top countries all do. Pretty hard to, and that's what the Moth class arguably is doing. But take Tom Slingsby. There's a good example. I don't know what passport Tommy has, but he's won just again, as you all know. We covered it, the Moth Worlds in, where was it, Garda. He's Australian. He's kind of a man without an America's Cup country unless and until there's an Australian team. And Nathan Outteridge, who is also an Aussie and who had a few words to say about nationality rules. And Magnus makes the argument that the sailors are all afraid to say anything. They all think it's terribly wrong and terribly unjust, but they won't speak up because they're afraid of getting a black tick next to their name, and they won't even get a ride in Sail GP. You should go, all of you who are interested in this topic, I commend to you again, Julia loves the guy.
I do.
But Magnus Wheatley's Rule 69 blog, you should go have a look at it. And it's free to subscribe. It comes out almost every day, sometimes twice a day. Magnus is prolific, if nothing else. Rarely in error, but, well, some people would say sometimes in error, but never in doubt. And he writes beautifully. And he's sometimes all over the map, but he's a bright guy and one of the two people who says what he means and means what he says, at least at that moment. And that's better than you can say for just about any other yachting journalist in the sport, with present company accepted.
Chris
Which is
Bogart.
again, excuse me, Julie, which is one of the reasons why we don't have too many sponsors, so we can say what we want what we mean what we say. You were saying.
Chris Bogart says, as a sport sailing as a sport is in the middle of making a huge technological leap that requires much more athletic sailors. Not all countries are interested in keeping up with the USA.
Well, it's not the USA that they're keeping up with at this point. It's New Zealand and the Brits. Mm-hmm. Ed Worley is saying, well, that's an interesting comment. Ed Worley, a strong nationality rule will encourage the development of sailors and sailing in challenging countries. Mm-hmm. PGN Ocean Racing. Fritz Mueller, no worries. I was just at the start. Okay, this is the builders are actually, because they're back on talking about the mini transat. Mm-hmm. Alex Hayworth. Now, Alex, a very bright, well-connected guy, and I hear from him all day, all week. A strong nationality rule would encourage Alinghi Australia, meaning somebody coming in and getting the top Australia sailors and forming a well-funded team. Well, maybe. Paul Homchick is saying, why should there be a strong nationality rule? For the same reason the Olympics have a nationality rule and yacht clubs are a national club. This swing to teams is croutonic. With a K, he says. Croutonic.
David James says the America's Cup does not exist for the purpose of employing professional sailors. It exists to fulfill the deed of gift.
And David is right, of course. Now, he's he went to a college that's kind of a low, what kind of college did he go to?
And the best one.
The best one? Was that UC Berkeley?
Right.
Cal Berkeley?
Yeah.
David James is a lawyer who went to Julia's alma mater, who went to Stanford.
Yeah.
I'm a big Stanford fan, too. I'm a convert now. Who else here? Fritz, he's back on the 6 point. Jonathan Frank, it's croutonic. It is too exclusionary. We deserve to see the best sailors in the best boats. No nationality rule, Jonathan Frank is saying. Jonathan Frank's also, this guy is a Renaissance guy. He's an airline pilot for United. Mm-hmm. He's a keen yachtsman. He and his wife, Barb, big sailors and artists. I mean, look at this. I've shown this before, but I'll pivot around here again and show it again. How do I get the easiest there? This painting by Jonathan Frank of the 2013 Cup here, the moment that the Kiwis almost capsized. So he's a painter. He's also, I think he plays guitar. Let me get my earbud cable out from underneath my butt. That's more comfortable. And he's also written the lyrics. I think I've said this before, so he won't mind me saying, to take me out to the yacht race or whatever we're going to call it. We're going to work on that some more. What other comments, Julia?
They're encouraging homegrown talent.
Yeah, go ahead. Ed Worley saying a lack of strong nationality mindset could lead to teams jumping from country to country to follow the money.
Yep. And they do that now.
And David James is the bright boy that he is, making another keen observation. The most popular sporting event on the planet is the World Cup, meaning the soccer or the football World Cup, because of the nationality rule. Mm-hmm. He also, Clark Chapin made an astute comment. Stanford University, the Michigan of the West.
Yes.
Andrew Dolly DeVola saying, with no Aussies, who will sail the boats? No. Bill Canfield saying they cheer for the country, not the sailors. Christopher Gillingham, it's correct. Let's encourage and develop homegrown talent in each competing country. Well, that pretty well covers, no pun intended, the waterfront. Mm. Julie Aaron's one other comment. We don't train Americans enough. Slingsby and Outeridge are great guys and great sailors, and I wish Australia would have a team. I love watching them sail, indeed. But I'm not sure it's up to the countries to train the sailors. I think it's up to the sailors to figure out how to train themselves, get into programs, get into, you don't rely on the RYA to train you how to go sail in the America's Cup. You might rely on the RYA and coaches like John Emmett to get you to the elite part of the class and the dinghy classes, and then maybe to international competition, and then maybe to the Olympics if you're really lucky. Okay, enough. What?
Just a reminder to read the comments, because there are lots of interesting comments, and they follow separate themes. But you'll get it when you read it.
No, good point, Julia, as always. Well, here's my take on all this. I don't think we need a nationality rule if we get the costs down so that more teams and countries can participate. Then you get an Australian team, the Aussies are going to want, assuming the compensation is reasonably equal, and there hadn't been an Australian team since 1995, remember? 95, was that the last team? Yeah, I think it was 95 in San Diego when their boat sunk.
Oh, yes.
Sunk. There was a team there in 92, JB, John Bertrand, Aussie John Bertrand was behind it. There hadn't been a team since. Because people are saying, well, there was a bit of a scandal over some sponsorship money in the craft, whatever that was all about. If we had more teams, more countries, if it didn't cost $100 to $200 million for a 3-year campaign, and if the campaigns could be, you could do one and build on it, you could do it inexpensive, kick the tire.
Yeah. And
these were not so technologically challenging that nobody can do it because there isn't the mechatronics and there aren't the engineers, and it requires a Formula One team at Brackley to be able to engineer the thing, or the experience of the Kiwis and that operation that Grant Dalton has put together and before him. It's just a country that is sailing mad, and they're not a large country, but they've got a great sailing experience and great sailing heritage.
Yes.
Peter Blake and so on, Russell and Brad and so on. But if we don't have more countries in the Cup, and I think a nationality rule might discourage having more countries in the Cup. Now, Dalt says, oh yeah, we'll have some kind of a rule that will be an exemption for newcomers, newbies, first-time teams. Well, that starts to be rules for thee, but not for me, like we see here in the politicians. And this, see, I got it in. I worked it in. You have to wear a mask, Julia. Tom, you have to double vax, and you can't go to the yacht club unless you can show your double vax. But I'll go party like our mayor did with no mask on in a nightclub here in San Francisco. Oh, I forgot. I got caught up in the moment, she said. What a crouton. Sorry. Julia, you were saying.
I've forgotten.
Oh, I'm sorry. You got so excited by my comment about our croutonic mayor.
Yeah.
And others. So, what's this, Gordon Smith? Tom, you need to focus on what Ineos and Mercedes invest their energy in. They want to build long-term franchise value. It is not a charity. They want to build a sustainable and valuable franchise event. Totally agree. But again, more countries, more teams, franchises, that's what was happening coming out of 83 and 87. And we need some more of that. We need some more of that. And the only way to do that is probably to loosen this up, to let people move around a little bit. Maybe, I don't know how salary caps would work. I don't know how you would do, Julia, how you would ever do like we have, but our pro sports teams here now have them. Yeah. The salary cap in the NBA and the but we've got to seriously get the cost of these campaigns down, and the only way we're going to do that is by reducing the technical complexity of the boats, making the boats more affordable, making the campaigns more affordable, making the boats more relatable to everyday sailors. I mean, what John Emmett said at the top of the show, right?
Yeah. What I was going to say is Japan has done a very good job of going from a newbie to a pro as a sailing team.
Say that again?
Japan has made great headways from going in a newbie GP to a winning GP
but they have no... Leo Takahashi's the only Japanese guy on the boat. They keep saying, oh, we're going to have this year, season 2. Okay, COVID intervened. But sorry, they got all Aussies and
right now right now they don't.
Yeah, they do. The only tell me if I'm wrong, but the only Japanese guy on Nathan's boat is Leo Takahashi. So I I don't know. It cuts both ways. Now, does that stop Japanese people from cheering for? I think that's probably a good point, Julie, is that because there aren't more Japanese on the boat and because there's not a Japanese skipper, I don't know that the Japanese are ever going to follow that SailGP team. What do you think?
Could be.
Tell me if I'm wrong.
I don't know.
Why are more Americans not following the American SailGP team? Is it because Jimmy Spithill is steering and Paul Campbell James is on the boat? And who are the Americans on the boat? Rome Kirby, okay, he was steering the boat. He's still on the boat, I think. I don't know. Okay, I think we've beaten this one to death.
Yes.
But I think overriding, I think the nationality rule will sort out. Look at 2007 as an example, the America's Cup 2007. After Ernesto and Alinghi and SNG, Société Nautique Genève, the Swiss, won it, took it back, shopped the venue. They had all these venues. They had 60 some odd venues bidding for the right to host it. They had Portugal and Spain, big bidding competition. They got a lot of money. Bankrupt Valencia and the Comunidad, the region. But nonetheless, marvelous event, bunch of teams. The roadshow team, the roadshow events, the so-called octos, were very expensive. And I don't think they added really any value to the Cup. I think the New York Yacht Club style of a 3-year event, go to the venue, train, have a world championship 1 year in advance like they did in Perth in '86. All the teams but Dennis showed up. Of course, Dennis ultimately won, but nonetheless, they showed up. And then have the big deal in '87 as they did at the end of the 3rd year, and then get on with it again. With regularity and with certainty, you'd have a lot of teams from a lot of countries, and a lot of eyeballs, and then you'd have a lot of sailors sailing for these various teams with or without a nationality rule.
Yeah, regularity has a lot to do with it. Every 3 or 4 years, you have to re-educate everybody about what America's Cup is about.
In boats that are affordable and accessible, so that if somebody gets a bee in their bonnet or a burr under their saddle, and they can go buy a boat from the last go around that's still, okay, it may not be competitive in the next iteration, but it was competitive and they're available and they can buy it and they can kick the tires and they can tow in the water campaigns. And then maybe 2 years or two cycles hence, they can do it. That's what we got to do. We've got to make this more accessible.
Absolutely.
And relatable.
Yes.
And then I think the nationality rule goes away. It's not quite so important. In fact, not maybe important at all. And, you can argue both sides.
Yeah, I can argue both sides.
Okay, one last look at the comments, because I would have probably just gotten a whole bunch of people to comment. Steve Bushy, Aerosmith. Hello, Steve. Szymanski, Mary Jude is back. David James, the reason that more Americans are not following SailGP is that nobody cares. Sailing is a participatory sport, not a spectator sport. Do you agree with that, Julia?
A lot of it.
I do too. Paul Homchick, plus the fastest boat wins the America's Cup. How many times has the skill of the sailors been determinative? Good point. Certainly it has been, though. And here's how, Paul, as you know, Homchick knows this. If you don't have really damn good sailors, it's not necessarily how they race the boat during the match. It's how they sail the boat and the sailor-engineer interface in those long months and years ahead of the match that builds the boat up and gets the speed and the performance and designs the next boat, designs the next rig that gets this. It's that interface. And that's why when Sir Ben Ainslie came on our boat on the Trimaran here, not the Trimaran, on the 72 here, when we were down 8, whatever it was, and came back at 198, Ben coming on there really helped with the sailor design team interface. It was a fresh set of eyes. No disrespect to John Kostecki, JK. But John's not the most forceful, outgoing in the world. He's a tremendous sailor and a terrific skipper. But when you're an advisor as the tactician and part of the afterguard, and you got to go in and sit in these meetings, and we used to call him Stevie Wonder. Well, on the one hand, you kind of would do this, or on the other hand, you could do this. And Ben Ainslie came in, we got to do this. We got to do it tonight so we can have this tomorrow. Right, wrong, or indifferent, you got to cut through butter with a hot knife. And that's, Paul Homchick, why you got to have terrific sailors on these America's Cup boats not for winning the races. Okay, they got to win the races too. But it was that Australia 2, it was that whole crowd, John Bertrand, John Longley, Grant Simmer, that whole group that sailed and sailed and sailed, had come from the 80 Cup. Some of them had come from the 77 Cup. And sailed together, learned together, trained together, learned how to sail Australia 2, figured out, Tom Schnackenberg, figured out that the spinnaker had to be different because of this wing keel they were dragging around, but because the wetted surface area was so much lower on that boat, it went like a bat out of hell downwind. That's where the sailors come in. The sailor-engineer interface. That's where the engineers come in, too. It's not just in an ivory tower someplace. Okay, enough. John Emmett, I assume there will be less grinders in the future. Well, again, I want to see more sailors, not fewer. I'd rather have no stored energy. I'd rather go back to the roots, which we say in Michigan, Julia. Do you say roots or roots?
Roots.
Roots, as we would say. The rough. I'd rather see no stored energy. Go back to traditional sailors, have more sailors on the boat, design boats that are relatable to all of us who do not use stored energy, and have more sailors so you have more employees, more fun, more action. I don't want to see a boat going around there pushing a button. They got a joystick. We don't know what the frig is going on then.
Yeah.
In the good old days, the sailors were more important than the CFD world of today. They're still both important. Look at all the hearts for that comment.
I know.
The editor in me, somebody's saying, who's that? Grinders. Who said that? Editor, regular big. Ask any gastroenterologist. I'm late again, but I have a good excuse. So winterize and shrink wrapping. Hello, Ken Saban in Toledo. Yeah, it's getting to be winter up there in the Great Lakes. Let's have regular yacht racing. Have technologically complex boats. Have boats that are difficult to sail. Have box rule tell me what's 75s or 80s that are light and fast and go like a bat out of hell upwind and down. Maybe they're partially assisted foils. I don't know, but keep the expense down. And as soon as you introduce swinging keels and foiling boats,
lots of hearts.
You get huge expense and huge complexity, and you knock out of the box a country like maybe Denmark or Norway or Sweden. Sweden's been in the Cup, or other countries that have a rich sailing tradition that could compete if they didn't have to raise 150 mil. And they didn't have to try to hire Boeing or Airbus to help them design and manage the boat.
And if they used existing facilities.
Well, and you keep saying, and you're right. That's why this is going back to Auckland. They've got existing facilities there. Yeah. They don't have to build out infrastructure. Somehow they will figure out, Mr. Dalton and the business community and the government will figure out, Mr. Dunphy, if he's still around and not trying to knock Mr. Dalton out of the box, which was stupid. Hamish has got to stop trying to knock the Royal Yacht Squadron out of the box. That dog ain't gonna hunt, as we say in Michigan. Yeah. Ain't gonna hunt, Julia.
Yes.
And get on with yacht racing. And Mr. Dalton and Sir Jim Ratcliffe, they've got to get the protocol out. I'm sorry, I've just kept my powder dry for the last X many weeks, and I'm fed up with this. I told you they weren't going to make their 17th of September deadline, and now they haven't. Now we got more uncertainty than ever. How do you decide whether you want to host this at your venue, whether it's Cork or Valencia or Jeddah or tell me where, unless you know what the protocol says? You got to know how many races, how, when, how long. And the other problem in the Middle East, I was talking this morning with Magnus and looking at the mean temperature, daytime temperature in Bahrain and Abu Dhabi and in the Emirates and in Jeddah. You can't run this in their summer. And they're in the Northern Hemisphere. And the deed of gift says if the Cup's in the Northern Hemisphere, it'll be run between April and October, May and October. And in the Southern Hemisphere, November and April. So I think there's some people, and my dear friend Russell Green may be one of these people, I don't know, who think they can opt out of that clause by mutual consent. They cannot. There will be hell to pay if they try to do that. The deed of gift, the only things you can opt out of by mutual consent are things like the race course and the number of races. There's a whole paragraph, and it says at the end of the paragraph, and if you can agree to some other race conditions, you can do it, and if you can't, the foregoing will apply, and that's what happened in 2010. That's what happened in 1988 We had deed of gift matches where all those provisions, we couldn't mutually consent out of but one or two of them. So that's why we had first to wind 2. You had the windward leeward and the triangle and the windward leeward, 20 mile up and back, and 39 equilateral triangle. That's in the deed of gift. And also in the deed of gift is that if it's in the northern hemisphere, it's between May and October. If it's the southern hemisphere, it's between October and April. Can't opt out of that by mutual consent. In fact, there was no provision for running it in the southern hemisphere. Remember that? And after they won, after the Perthes won, they had to go to court in New York and get the court to amend. It's one of the very few amendments to the deed of gift because it was impracticable. Everyone agreed. Everyone said it's impracticable, so we'll amend it. Okay, enough. Make the America's Cup less expensive. Don't turn it into the Etchells Worlds or to a weekend regatta. Make it a design competition, but make it relatable and much more affordable. Get more countries, more teams, and then you won't need any of these other rules, Crutonic or otherwise. Julia.
No, I'm done.
Okay, so we're almost 2 hours in. So to our show number 457, thank you to all of you who've joined. A lot of people on here as we get into our final block, the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot block. And Julia, apropos this, one of the things you and I are concerned about whether we're going to have our booster shot.
Yes.
We're now eligible for it, and you are marking time, right? You're keeping your powder dry for now.
Yes, I'm going to wait until UCSF asks me to.
University of California here in San Francisco, huge medical complex, teaching hospital, and so on.
I'm a Moderna kid anyway, so.
And they don't have a Moderna booster yet.
No, and I'm glad.
Well, I did talk to Dr. Andrew McIrvin yesterday morning, or texted back and forth at length, that I said, Doc, I'm a Pfizer, and after Pfizer back in February, and now I'm eligible for the booster, and some people are going to get it, and some people are not. Should I go get it? Because I'm hearing from people like Julia and some of our other medical professionals up here, we should hold off.
I'm going to get it, but I'm just not going to take it at the very first opportunity.
Because
it seems to have more effect in lengthening it if you wait a little bit.
It does. It's apparently, and that's what Andrew told me yesterday, Andrew McIrvin. But he said, by all means, you should get the booster. In fact, Andrew, we'll get him back on the show at some point. We don't want to make this the COVID show, but the weekly COVID show. But he did say, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm just telling you what Dr. McIrvin told me. He said, no, Tom, you're wrong. Get the booster. Get it. Yeah, if you wait a little bit, no big deal, but you should get it. We'll probably all, as he's been telling us for months, all going to get it. This is now endemic. It's not a pandemic. It's going to be around it's probably going to be around for a long time. So he changed my thinking. I'm probably going to go get the Pfizer booster. It's like the flu shot.
Yep.
Andrew was in a program and has tested the booster for the AstraZeneca jab. So I pass that along because we make some jokes about it here in the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot segment, because a lot of people are saying, well, what about the people who don't get vaccinated? You're hurting me. And here's one joke. Hey, stupid, if you don't use your umbrella, mine won't work. Apropos this, should you get vaccinated or not? Because if you don't get vaccinated, you're hurting other people. Well, we had an interesting discussion yesterday among our Monday virtual lunch bunch. And there was a doctor on there who said, no, Tom, that's wrong. We want people to get vaccinated because if they are vaccinated and then get a breakthrough case or get it, or hopefully don't get it, but if they do, their antibody levels are their viral levels are much lower, and the chances of passing it on to somebody else are much lower if they are in fact vaccinated. So in fact, this doctor friend of ours yesterday said, if you do get vaccinated, you will help reduce the spread because your viral level, even if you get breakthrough, will be much lower indeed. So this joke is, maybe wrong. On the other hand, there's the libertarians, which I am, and which you are, Julia, with your Pindar mug. I caught you in the act. Are saying, hey, my body. What was the feminists saying in the 60s?
My body, my choice.
My body, my choice. And I agree. If you don't want to get it, don't get it. And then don't be upset when they say you can't come into the St. Francis Yacht Club unless you're double vaxxed. For all those people who wore a mask while alone in the car, the new outdoor seatbelt is now available. So that's a little lighter. When you get into the car, I think you can take your mask off, right, Julia?
Absolutely.
Although I forget.
It depends. No, except the Uber drivers.
Well, I'm talking about when I get in my own car to drive back from Walgreens with your prescriptions.
Right.
We need an outdoor seatbelt. Now, this one was funny. Apropos all this craziness, gender stuff that's going on. The prisoner looks very nice, but that's not what I meant by 20 lashes. Come on. Silly but funny, especially with what's going on. Today I'm going to decide to be a woman, Julia, and I'm going to compete.
20 lashes.
With 20 lashes, and I'm going to give me 20 lashes, and I'm going to compete in women's events, sporting events, because I've decided I'm a woman. I mean, it's Crutonic, excuse me. I'm not talking about people who have transitioned. We've had Karen Robertson on here, who's an MTF, a male to female trans person, and she's wonderful, and she's a great sailor, and more power to her. But that's not what I'm talking about. Finally, I think Ryman sent this. I can't remember, but some cheeky person, the trailer for sale, and then somebody stuck a sign next to it, or rent, rooms to let 50 cents, no phone, no pool, no pets, ain't got no cigarettes. So we got to have somebody, got to get, James or somebody to write a song for us about that.
Yeah.
That's the way I feel about this show. We're not for sale, but we are for rent. If somebody wants to send us some money on Patreon, we appreciate it. But we like to keep our ability, right, to make our own. Okay, that's it for this show. Our finish line, we're just reminding you that not only are we doing this show now at 2000 going forward, even after we changed back to standard time in this country, but the soup of the day here at the Beach Street Yacht Club and on TFE Live is always whiskey with water croutons. Right?
Yeah. Actually, I've been thinking about a Sazerac.
Yeah, well, we should go to the Yacht Club. We can't tonight, but we can go Wednesday. It's open on Wednesday. You can get it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Again, we will do this at 2000 UTC year around. Puts a little pressure on us after we go on standard time, but I'll just get up an hour earlier. Julia, your witness?
Yes. You are now instructed to like, follow, and share.
Comments are welcome too, even in replay. Support us on Patreon if you would, please. Patreon.com/join/Sailing Illustrated. Haven't any sign-ups lately. We better get some people to sign up. Those of you that do give us a few bucks or more each month, we deeply appreciate it. Julie, any last-minute thoughts?
No, but there are lots of nice hearts going up. That's nice.
Any comments we should deal with here? There were so many comments today.
Yes.
I couldn't keep up with them. Julia, thanks. All the thumbs up and the hearts are all responding. You see, they do when you ask them, Julia. Maybe, you know what we should do?
What?
We better switch this, and you'd better say, do the Patreon push. They'd probably sign up then. Julie Ahrens, Michigan and Stanford are also fine academic universities, but remember, I am a Cleveland, Ohio one, born and raised, so don't hurt my feelings by rubbing it in. Well, yeah, but Ohio State's a fine university too, even though I can the Ohio State University, even though I can barely mention that.
And the president is a good friend and a member of the Monday Lunch Bunch.
He is, who is here at UCSF, right? He's the head of the ophthalmology something here at UCSF, former president. No, former ophthalmology guy here, senior serious guy, is now the president at Ohio State.
Right.
That's right. Well, Cleveland Clinic, you can. We're so blessed in this country, as most of your countries, to have major medical institutions here, there, and everywhere, including in Cleveland and in Michigan and here and wherever else. Okay, that's it for us. Any other comments? Another great afternoon, time well spent with friends far and wide. Thank you, Jonathan Frank. Yeah. I got to figure out this must be a Dutch name. Tierd de Jong. I'll look that up. Remind me to look that up. By the way, now the number of YouTube subscriptions is 600. Really? Yeah, we are posting. I actually owe 3 posts to YouTube. I haven't gotten the last 3 shows up, but I will today. I promise I will. And one other comment. A lot of you, I'm constantly up against the Facebook 5,000 friend on my personal page, and I do post stuff on there a lot. And there's sailing and some non-sailing stuff. And a lot of you are friends of mine on not Tom Jr., which I'll probably get rid of that, but on my personal page. And a lot of you, there must be 100 people standing in line to get friended, but I can't because I'm up against Mark Zuckerberg's 5,000 limit.
Follow.
But you can follow a personal page, right?
Yeah.
A personal so-called profile,
or just follow Sailing Illustrated.
Well, it's better. Yeah, I mean, if you want to follow my page, those of you that are in the queue to become a member, I mean, I go through and kill members every now and then. You know, the people who are not posted, people who are maybe deceased even. There are a few of those, but more it's just people who are not active on Facebook. So we'll get rid of it. Okay, thank you all. Thank you very much. Hope to see you on Friday. In the meantime, have a great rest of your week. And of course, if you can, sail fast, sail safe, and have fun.